Welcome to the Twin Cities Bicycle Club Bicycle University. My name is Edward Ebro, and I am the coordinator for Bike U this year. Tonight, we will be hearing from Soren Jensen, the executive director of the Midtown Greenway Coalition. And before I hand the meeting over to Tim Rand, who organized this session, I have a few announcements. This is the fifth session of Bike U for the 2022 season. If you have not listened to our previous sessions on the environment, TCBC history, equity in bicycling, and electric bikes, please go to the Bike U page off the main TCBC website. And you can find that just right on the top menu bar. You'll see a thing on Bike U, and that'll take you to the page, and you can go down to each of the session. And in each session, there's a link to the TCBC YouTube channel where each of these is recorded. The session tonight will also be up after the conclusion of the meeting and when I have had time to edit and post it to YouTube. So I'm sure by tomorrow sometime. I want to thank all our TCBC U Council of Regents, including John Benda, Mike Beatles, Shelby Miller, and Tim Rand for all their work and assistance. If anyone else would like to join the council, please contact me. It is an extensive interview process. I'm just warning you. No, just kidding. During the session tonight, please keep your audio muted. So please do that so we don't get other noise in the recording. But do keep your video on so that we can show who is in attendance tonight and so that Soren knows who he's talking to. There will be a question and answer session after the presentation, but during the meeting, you can enter questions in the Zoom chat function, and Tim and I will be monitoring those questions and make sure they all get answered during Q&A if you don't bring it up afterwards yourself. I would like now to turn the meeting over to Tim Rand, who will introduce our speaker. Tim?
Okay, welcome everybody. We are super excited tonight to have Soren Jensen with us. He's the executive director of the Midtown Greenway Coalition, and he's been in this position for since 2011. And in the past, he's also held positions with Target Corporation, the American Red Cross, and the National Parks Conservation Association. He has degrees in nonprofit management and a BA from Hamline University and the University of Iowa, respectfully. So this will be a special opportunity to learn all about your questions about the Greenway. I have a list myself, which I've provided him, but he's really accomplished a lot. Well, the whole coalition and his predecessors accomplished a lot with the Greenway. So I'd like to turn it over to Soren at this time and welcome him and just give us some of the history of the coalition and how the Greenway really got started too, because I don't know about you. I was always, when I was in an earlier stage of life, let's say, I kind of wondered how the best way to bike through Lake Calhoun, and all of a sudden this wonderful trail was there. So be a little bit interested in past history as well. Soren.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim. And nice shirt, by the way. I really like that. And thanks to Edward and TCBC. I'm super excited to be here and chat about the Greenway. I also just thanks to many of you are members of the Midtown Greenway Coalition. Thank you for your donations. We're a little nonprofit that works for the Greenway. And so everyone is a member. We appreciate it. And TCBC gives us an annual contribution too, which we very much appreciate. So shout out to all of you. Thank you. And thank you for joining me tonight. I'm glad you want to hear about the Greenway. A little bit about me. I was asked to talk a little bit about how I got here and how I got into this job. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. And as I think it was John noted, I went to school at the University of Iowa in Iowa City, where I studied psychology and communications. And then later on, as Tim mentioned, I got a master's degree in nonprofit management from Hamline University, and I actually got to go to night classes over on campus, which is great because Hamline has a really cool campus. I've lived all over Minneapolis and St. Paul, either in the city proper. I kind of, when I landed here after Iowa, I ended up on Cathedral Hill in St. Paul and really enjoyed being there. And then the Halloween snowstorm struck, if everyone remembers that. And my job was over at the Heart Association in Edina, and I couldn't get there for like the whole week if anyone was here for that. And I thought I should move into Minneapolis. So I moved to Minneapolis, and I've lived all over Minneapolis now since. Uptown, I've lived in Loring Park, Longfellow, and right now I'm in Fulton, which is a neighborhood over by Lake Harriet, and not too far from 50th and France. I'm here with my wife and my 3 daughters. My wife is the neighborhood coordinator for Fulton and Lyndhurst neighborhoods, so she helps those neighborhoods. So we're kind of a nonprofit-y kind of family right now. And my 3 daughters are in public school, the Minneapolis public schools. So real quickly, my hobbies, obviously biking. And really the way I got into biking was through RAGBRAI. Who here has been on RAGBRAI? Anybody? Nope. Oh, there's one maybe. Bike ride across Iowa, so fun. I did it 13 times, usually with a team, and usually all 7 days, all 450 or 500 miles. I had a rule that I would bike every mile of every day, and there's always a century loop, and I always look forward to taking that and trying to convince my teammates to join me. And usually I could find one that was up for it. So but other hobbies, I really love the local music scene. One of the reasons I moved up here after being down in Iowa City was all the great bands that were from here that kept coming down to Iowa City, like the Wallets and the Suburbs. And I got into Husker Du, and I got into early Soul Asylum and the Replacements. And then my all-time favorite band, Trip Shakespeare. Just I love that band so much. And I'm still really into the music scene, going to First Avenue on Friday night, actually, with one of my buddies. I also sail. I have a sailboat over on Lake Harriet, and I try to get out there as often as I can, although it never seems enough. And then my big hobby these days is home brewing. I'm really into making my own beer. And so someday maybe we'll figure out a way to share it with y'all. But I just won a couple of ribbons at the state fair, a couple of blue ribbons for a couple of my Belgian beers. So that's a big hobby of mine, and I'm pretty excited about that. As Tim mentioned, I've mostly worked in nonprofits. I've worked for the Heart Association, for the Red Cross, for the United Way. I had a really cool job out in Washington, D.C. with the National Parks Conservation Association. I got to visit national parks all over the country, and I even got to visit the national parks in China, which was amazing. And then I worked on the Virgin Islands and the national park down there after that, which was great. I worked for Target Corporation after that, but I was the nonprofit guy there. I worked for volunteerism and for the United Way, trying to get the employees to donate to United Way and also to volunteer. And then I transitioned to the Red Cross, and later on I got this job about 11 years ago because I saw it and I said, hey, it's about biking, and I love biking. I was still really into RAGBRAI, and when I first had this job, I just decided I'm going to ride my bike every day, and it was super easy because I lived in Longfellow and I could hop up to the Midtown Greenway. As many of you know, in the winter the Greenway is plowed before most city streets, and so the hard part is getting to the Greenway sometimes after a big snowstorm. But if you can get there, it's usually plowed by the time you get there. So I rode every single day for years and years and years with this job. And it's, I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of a fun challenge to bike when it's like 0 or -5. I still, I don't do that quite as much anymore because I've got my 3 kids, but I try to bike as often as I can to the Greenway. Excuse me. So let's talk about the Greenway. So Edward, if you want to pop up that first picture so y'all can take a look at the beautiful Midtown Greenway. I'm getting over cold, sorry. There it is. So the Midtown Greenway Coalition, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. almost everyone calls us for anything about the Greenway, but we don't actually own it. We're the ones that had the idea for it and then worked to get it built. And so it's actually owned by Hennepin County, excuse me, and Hennepin County Railroad. They purchased it for future rail. But we had the idea for it, and we're the ones that worked to get it built. So how do we get started? Well, we had a founder named George Puzak. I don't know if anyone's ever met George, but he was a park board commissioner, and he also helped get the Cedar Lake Trail going. But he saw this railroad trench, and it actually had active railroad cars in it. And if any of you saw the Greenway before it became the Greenway, or saw the trench, you might remember it was just a nasty place. It was full of trash. Speaking of the replacements, there's a picture of the replacements sitting on an old couch in the Greenway, if anyone's ever seen that. So it's it really was a nasty place. But George had this idea that, oh, we're gonna turn it into a excuse me, into a bike trail, and everyone thought, oh, you're crazy. It's never going to be a bike trail. But he worked and worked and worked, and he got all these neighborhoods together that lived along the Greenway, and he literally got up on a milk crate, and to anyone who would listen, and said, this should be a bike trail. This should be a bike trail. And everyone thought he was kind of crazy. But he finally got one neighborhood, I believe it was Midtown Phillips, if I'm not mistaken, but one of the Midtown neighborhoods to say, okay, we believe you, we'll help you. And then he formed a coalition of neighborhoods all up and down the Greenway. And then he hired a gentleman named Tim Springer, if anyone ever met Tim Springer, and he was our first executive director. And so then what happened, there still wasn't a Greenway, but they formed the Midtown Greenway Coalition in the late 80s, so like 89, 90, and then officially became a nonprofit in 1995. And the mission of the coalition is to empower communities to develop, improve, protect, and enjoy the Midtown Greenway as a green urban corridor to improve people's lives. And I just usually say, for shorthand, to protect and enhance the Greenway. So that's what I think about every day. How can we protect, excuse me, and enhance the Greenway? Let me stop for a second so I can get a drink and see if there's any questions.
Okay, I've got some comments and questions. They're all from John Benda. Thank you, John. John Benda has been on the RAGBRAI 11 times, but he says that Soren has him beat, and hooray, Iowa. And John is also curious, do you listen to the Commuter's Bike Report on Minnesota Public Radio?
No, tell me about that. How does it ever include the Greenway?
Well, I haven't heard it that many times, but there's a guy on Twitter called the Peddling Pastor, and he's a pastor of some church, and he commutes to work. I don't know if he uses the Greenway necessarily, but every morning he or other commuters will text or post on Twitter the conditions for bike commuting. And Kathy Wurzer, she takes about 30 seconds. And it's like around 7, 8. I think she does it a couple different times. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
I haven't heard it lately, but I think they mainly do it in the winter, when there's a lot of ice on the roads and a lot of weather hazards.
Good point. Yeah, but if you're on Twitter, search for the Peddling Pastor.
Very cool.
He's always biking around and
very cool,
doing stuff.
Were you on a RAGBRAI team? Were you on the Skunks or somebody like?
I rode with my hometown bike club, the Dubuque Bike Club.
Oh, sure. Oh,
And
sure.
they're a pretty motley crew.
We were called the
good.
mallet. We were called the mallet heads, and we had croquet mallets with us, and we'd stop and play croquet. And then I was on a really cool team called Molasses Asses that biked really slowly. That's why they called themselves Molasses Asses. But they were great.
Sure.
They were a great team.
Start slow, then taper off.
Yes, yeah, and they were slow to get up. Like we didn't get moving until 9:30 or 10 every day.
Gotcha. Yep.
Anyway, well, let's get back to the Greenway. So you're looking at the Greenway right here, and as most of you know, it's a 5.5 mile long trail, or 5.7 miles. You'll see sometimes from the Minneapolis lakes to the river, and of course, it connects to a lot of other trails. But I occasionally get someone calling me about the trail out in Hopkins and saying, "Hey, the Midtown Greenway needs help in Hopkins." I'm like, "Well, that's not the Midtown Greenway. It's completely in Minneapolis, but as you can tell, it keeps going. I mean, you can keep going west. We'll talk about later why you can't go east, because you hit the river, but we'll talk about what we're trying to do to fix that. But in any case, it is open 24/7, 365 days a year. It's lit up at night. It has its own plow crew to plow it in the wintertime. And as everyone knows, it used to be a railroad corridor. And so why is it sunken? And why are there 37 bridges? Well, originally it was just a rail line. It wasn't sunken. It wasn't in this trench. But Minneapolis started expanding, around the late 1800s and 1900, and there got to be a lot of car and train collisions and conflicts. And so the railroad didn't want to do it, but the city made them, through lawsuits and all kinds of pressure, they made them dig the trench and build all those bridges. And so the railroad had to dig the trench and put the rail line below grade and build all these bridges, 37 or so bridges. And so here's a classic one here at 14th Avenue or 13th. Yeah, it's 14th. And but they're all 100 years old. So they were all built in about 1910. And unfortunately, they're kind of starting to fall apart. And so they slowly are rebuilding them. There's new ones at Portland and Cedar and Fremont. And then the one at 10th Avenue is closed right now because it started to fall apart. And unfortunately, it won't be fixed for a while. But one thing that's interesting about these bridges is they are historically protected. In fact, the Greenway Trench is on the National Historic Register. And so you can't just build a new bridge anymore, a new modern bridge. It has to look like the old bridges. And so when they put in the new bridges, they have to build them like this. But one thing that's really interesting, at least to me, is they have to put those pillars back in. But these pillars in this picture are load bearing. But when they put in the new pillars in the bridges, like at Portland and Cedar, they're just for show. They're not actually load bearing. They're just there for cosmetic reasons so that they look like the old bridges. And so if they ever needed to be removed, they could be removed very easily and not compromise the bridge at all. So I think that's kind of interesting that they're fake. But that's going to be a constant challenge, is redoing these bridges. There's several that are scheduled to be repaired, and I'm always working with the city or the county, urging them not to detour people out of the Greenway. It seems like they think it's no big deal to detour cyclists out of the Greenway, and I tell them over and over again, it's a huge deal. It's dangerous. It ruins people's commutes and messes up their timing, and it's dangerous. You're putting them back out on the streets with cars. Even if they're on a protected bike lane, it's still very dangerous. And so I try to get them to make them very temporary. And the Fremont Bridge was done very poorly. They kept detouring people out of the Greenway, and we took it to the media and really complained a lot about that. And I think ever since they've tried to not have quite as bad a detours. let's pause for a second and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I don't have any new chat questions. John Benda and I were just talking about Dubuque, Iowa, because I was born there. Does anybody want to chime in and unmute themselves? Have any questions?
All right, well, thank you. I just needed a little chance there to
Okay.
cough a little bit. So the Greenway was built in 3 phases. It was built in 2000, 2004, and 2006. So we say that it has 3 phases. And then we sometimes call the Sabo Bridge over the Hiawatha the 4th phase. And that was built in 2007 to make it safer to cross Hiawatha 55. And so the first phase was from the lakes to 5th Avenue, and then 5th Avenue to Hiawatha. And the final phase was from Hiawatha to the river. And so there is still a train. We'll talk a little bit more about that on that final 3rd phase. A lot of people are surprised and they say, really? There's still a train over there that operates next to the Greenway. Although some people have say, oh yeah, I've seen that train, but it really only serves one client left, the Ayd Mill at 38th and Hiawatha, the Ayd flour mill. As we mentioned, the Greenway is owned by Hennepin County, and they bought it for future rail. And so it is possible that a streetcar could come through someday. And we can talk about that a little bit more, especially if anyone's interested, but it would go on the right-hand side here. And in this case, there isn't a ton of room, so there might have to be a single track streetcar. But it's also the reason why all the ramps are on the north side, because most of them are, because they're saving the south side for potential future rail. I will tell you that even though the county's been talking about this for 2 or 3 decades now, currently there's really no appetite to put rail in the Greenway. I see your question, Amy. We'll talk about the extension in a little bit, but it is related. And I say that because Southwest LRT has been, such a challenge, whatever word you want to use. But I'm not seeing there much of a chance of a streetcar coming to the Greenway anytime soon. So at best 10 years, but I don't think it's coming. But the official position of the Midtown Greenway Coalition is we would support a streetcar if done correctly, with the rail embedded in turf and grass, in single track where the Greenway's too narrow, running on batteries and recharging at the stations, so we don't need all the overhead wires. So we want it to be a low impact, very green streetcar. And so if the day comes, we're going to have to be advocates for that and advocate strongly that they do it the right way. So we're ready, we're prepared, but I don't really see it. I don't really see it coming. The trail itself is managed by the city under contract. So even though Hennepin County is the owner of the overall Greenway, the trail itself is maintained by the city. One thing they do is they put in those little blue emergency phones that you can see in this picture. Well, we found out that the phones weren't working very well. And so we decided to go test them. So we would call 911 and say, we're going to go test all your blue phones. And you'd push the button and it'd just be a crackly, creakly noise. And you couldn't hear the 911 operators. And so we got on the city for that, and kind of embarrassed them to go and maintain the phones. And so we haven't done that for a while now because we see their maintenance crews going out and testing them now. But that's interesting, those blue phones. Another safety feature, sometimes people say, Soren, there should be cameras in the Greenway. And I say, hey, look up. There's more cameras in the Greenway than any other bike trail in Minneapolis, or probably in the Twin Cities, probably actually anywhere in the state. There's one here on the left-hand side, that white box is a camera. And you'll see them all up and down the Greenway. I will say though that I see cameras as preventative. They're not super great at catching crime. There's very little crime in the Greenway. We can chat about that too, but you know, you kind of have to, camera has to be looking at the right place at the right time, and of course they're not everywhere, but I like them as preventative. So that's a couple of safety features, and both of those programs are run by the city, and then they maintain the trail and they put in all the lights. We also encourage them to put in more lights in the Greenway in lots of places. So pretty soon the park board's going to start getting involved because the Greenway has been designated a regional trail. So I expect some more amenities. You might wonder, some people have asked me, why are there no water fountains? Why are there no picnic benches? Why does this seem like, you know, a lot of amenities are missing that you see in other trails? We have managed to put in some memorial benches, and so we have a couple benches, but a lot of the benches are ours. They weren't put in by the county or anyone, and the reason is the county isn't really that good at managing bike trails. They sort of hold them for future rail, and they're not that interested in putting in all those normal amenities. I'm hoping the park board might be more interested, because really there's nowhere to get water in the Greenway. But I hope they're going to put some water at a new park that the park board has between 10th and 11th Avenue called Midtown Park or Cipro Park. But so the fact that Hennepin County owns it but holds it for future rail is one reason why you don't see a lot of the normal amenities. And also they don't like to put in stuff, especially on the side of the trail where the train could go one day. They don't want anything over there. So that's why as you're biking along, you see that empty space over there on the south side. It's for future rail. So we'll see what happens when the park board kind of gets on board. So Edward, let's move on to the next one. See what we got for a nice, we have some more photos to show you. I could talk about that beautiful green photo there. Oh, how about this? So about 5 years ago, we went to the city and said, hey, the first phase of the trail, remember I told you the trail was in 3 phases? So phase 1 from the lakes to 5th Avenue was really in bad shape. Tons of cracks, just really bad, if anyone remembers it. A lot of bumpity. And so it takes 5 years to get something in the budget, believe it or not. But we finally did. We convinced the city to put $1.5 million into the budget for the trail. And we had to wait for 5 years. And then last year they said, Soren, we're finally going to repave the Greenway. And I'm like, hooray, let's go. And then they said, well, we're going to try this new thing called micro paving. I'm like, well, I don't know about that because it's supposed to be a full mill and overlay. Like, oh, trust us, it's going to be great. And so they put down this crap, which was their micro paving, and they totally blew it. So I went out, I couldn't believe it. And I went out, I took this photo. This is near Colfax and Bryant. And I'm like, look at this. I mean, you missed entire spots. A bicyclist wheel could get stuck in there and flip them, you know, and especially in the winter, but anytime. And look, and even that is, and even as bad as that is, look how rough this surface is. So if any of you rode on it, especially on a road bike, I mean, if you're on a fat tire bike, whatever, but you know, but if you're on a road bike, it's just a horrible experience. People were calling me immediately saying things are falling off my bike, you know, lights are popping off, and like, this is horrible. What's happened? And, you know, I'm like, I know it's not what we ordered. So I went to the Public Works, Minneapolis Public Works, and I said, what happened? And they're like, oh, we did a new this microservice process, and it only cost $500,000. I'm like, well, don't get cheap on the Greenway. You had $1.5 million in your budget. What the heck were you thinking? You know, I go, it's terrible. And they're like, oh, we don't think it's so bad. I'm like, it's bad. I'm getting all kinds of phone calls. It's terrible. Are any of you cyclists at all? And of course, none of them are, which is the problem. Is way too many people have not. No, that's strong. Some of them are, but but a lot of them are not, and they're very car centric, and they think, oh, this is great. And I said, well, I need you to commit to redoing it. I'm sorry, but you still have $1 million left, by the way, that you didn't spend. I hope you didn't spend it somewhere else. And they said, oh, well, we don't know. Maybe in the spring it'll get better. I'm like, so it's going to magically heal itself over the winter time? Yeah, we think so. I'm like, it won't. It'll be just as bad in the spring as it is now. So you're saying you're not going to commit to redoing it, admit you blew it? No. Okay, I'm sorry to say that I'm going to have to elevate this. And so I did. And I bet many of you signed our petition. Thank you. Because suddenly we had a petition out, and suddenly it got 2,500 signatures, like immediately. And then the Star Tribune put it on the front page, and then all the TV stations covered it. And, it's this huge thing. And so this spring, and it kept going. And so this spring, I'm just going to relaunch it. But I decided to call over and see if Public Works had to change their mind. And Margaret Anderson Kelleher is a new director of Public Works. And she said, well, I'm going to have you talk to our director on Monday. I'm like, okay. So I talked to them, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't meet our standards. I'm like, okay, it took you 6 months to admit it, but because, I told Director Kelleher that I'm sorry, I'm going to relaunch this petition, and we're going to get 5,000 signatures. This is ridiculous. It's the Midtown Greenway. It is the most important commuter trail in the region. It's used by thousands of people every day. It's the major way people get to and from work. You've got to treat it. It's every bit as important as 35W or I-94 for cyclists. It's a game changer. It's one of the reasons that Minneapolis is known as one of the best places to bike in the world, not just in the US, but in the world. In the Midtown Greenway is leading the way. And you have to treat it like that. And so I talked to them, and they finally said, oh, okay, it doesn't meet our standards. We're going to redo it. So good news is, hopefully all of you have ridden on it. They redid it. They did more of a traditional overlay. About, what is it? It's been a month now, I suppose, or so. About a month ago by now. And it's a lot better. And I actually thought they would have striped it by now, but I don't think they have yet, have they? I didn't make it out. I don't think I've been on it yet this week, but they're supposed to restripe it pretty soon. So they'll get it restriped, but they promised they weren't going to detour or shut down the Greenway when they restriped it. So we don't have to worry about that. But I think it was Tim or someone that said, well, how come you only paved that first phase? And that's phase 1, and that's all that was funded. And so, but it's also the oldest part of the trail. If I remember when I first rode on the Greenway Trail, I didn't know what it was. And I got on it at the Minneapolis Lakes, and I just started riding, and it ended at 5th. And I'm like, well, this is cool, but I could kind of see that it needed to keep going. But the trail was built in 3 phases. And so the first phase is the oldest. So now we got to get funding for the second phase. In the meantime, they can go in and fix cracks and things, but a full paving, we're going to have to go back to the city and get that on there. So we'll do phase 2 next, and then we'll start to work on phase 3. So, all right, that is that. And thanks to all of you who signed the petition and helped out. Yeah, go ahead, Edward, and we can look at the next one. And I hope you all enjoy the smooth new pavement. I know the rollerbladers also were very excited about it too. So, well, that was a great victory, and it's an example of what we do. We're an advocacy group. I mean, that is exactly why we exist. Is we have to push the government sometimes to do the right thing, and most of the time we partner with them and everything's great, but ever so often they don't do the right thing, and we have to push them. So an example of a partnership we have with the county, and we work with them all the time, is Adopt a Greenway. So if you're an organization, a nonprofit, or a business, you can adopt the Greenway. So this is the CEO of Children's Hospital and some Children's Hospital employees, and they get a nice little sign on the Greenway. And we have about, I'd say, 36 organizations that are adopters, and they get a nice sign on the Greenway that the county makes. And then they agree to clean up the Greenway at least twice a year in exchange for this sign. And so it's a way we're able to help keep the Greenway clean. There's something about the trench that just attracts trash. Stuff blows in off the streets. It's always the worst in the spring. If anyone rides the Greenway in the spring, I'm always like, oh my God, it looks terrible. But the doctors really do a great job. And we're going to do a cleanup, by the way. There, you know, the amount it varies, but it's for a nonprofit like TCBC. To be honest, you could probably just swap your normal contribution that you send to us and say, hey, can we be an Adopt a Greenway organization? And I'd probably say sure, and I'll get you a nice little sign, and then you can clean up the Greenway. But it's usually like, I don't know, $400 for like 2 years. So it's a pretty good deal to be an adopter. It's a little more for bigger organizations. I think we ask Children's to give more like $1,000 for 2 years. But if you're a little nonprofit or a school, it's only a couple $100, and it's good for 2 years. We can also ask the county to send out crews to do some cleanups if it gets really bad. And then also, while I'm thinking about it, if all of you can help us by calling in graffiti to 311, and there's also an app you can download onto your phone for 311, Minneapolis 311, and you just take a picture of the graffiti, and that gets sent in, and then they'll come and clean it, because that's a constant battle. But I figure if everyone's always sending in pictures of graffiti, by law, it has to be cleaned up within 7 days, or by statute in the city. And so by sending it into 311, that triggers them to figure out who owns the surface in the Greenway or anywhere, public or private, and then they have to clean it up. So that's always a constant battle, but I encourage all of you to help us with that. I always send it in because I'm like, I don't like graffiti. It just, I mean, some of it's nice. Let's be clear. And we work really hard to put more murals in the Greenway. We've got 2 new murals in the Greenway that were put in this year. We always love public art in the Greenway, but that's not the same as graffiti, even if it's kind of creative or nice looking. Most of it's not. And so, but we're always working to clean the Greenway. So let's go to the next slide, Edward. While I'm thinking about it, we also plant a lot of trees in the Greenway. We have planted over 5,000 trees and shrubs in the Greenway. You know, a lot of those are just shrubs that are growing, trees normally in the Greenway on the sides, but we've added 5,000 over the years to make the Greenway even greener. One of our favorite programs is, and I'd love for all of you to consider volunteering, are the Midtown Bike Walk Ambassadors. The woman in the middle who's wearing her shirt backwards on purpose, so she's got the logo up front. She's our leader. Her name's Jane, and she leads bike rides in the Greenway every week and walks up on Lake Street every week. And they go out all year long, winter, summer, spring, fall, and we call them the Midtown Bike Walk Ambassadors. Sometimes they bring dogs, as you can see. And their goal is really just to bring cheer and happiness and say hello to people and provide directions. And they don't intervene in crime or anything like that. They're just sort of a group that's out saying hello. They stop into businesses. I mean, certainly there's a crime prevention element to what they do, because more people on the street helps prevent crime. But really, they're trying to build community. They're trying to spread cheer. They're trying to help people. So we used to have a program called Trail Watch, and this is very similar to that, but we changed it to Midtown Bike Walk Ambassadors and added walking. And so if any of you are interested in that, please, there's information on our website at midtowngreenway.org. Jane would love to have you. You can bike or walk once a year. You can walk once a week, once a month, whatever you'd like. But it's a pretty fun program, and really it's just about kind of getting people out and having a nice time. So that's the Midtown Bike Walk Ambassadors. We'll get the next one up. Next slide up. The bridge over the river. So we talked about why does the Greenway end at the river, and why can't we use this bridge? And I think someone put it in the chat too. So as most of you know, the Greenway, as you're going towards St. Paul, going east, it ends at the river, and you have to get down off the Greenway and go up to Franklin, or go down to Lake Street and cross there. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could cruise across on this beautiful old bridge going over the Greenway? And we've long believed that that's exactly what we should be able to do. And so, I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago now, we decided to redouble our advocacy efforts for this. And we've gotten significant amount of support from the public and from the media. We did 2 reports. Our first report was talking about how much would it cost to rehab this bridge. Some of you may know that this part of the Mississippi River is actually part of the national park system. That is a national park you're looking at. It's the Mississippi River Gorge. And sometimes as you're going across either Lake or Franklin, I can't remember, you'll see a little National Park Service sign. And I don't know if you've ever wondered what the heck. But that's a part of the National Park Service. And so this bridge has been there well over 100 years, and it's owned by CP Rail. They only, and then it's leased out by another railroad, and they only use it once a day. And they mostly serve one client. It's the Ayd Mill down on 38th and Hiawatha. I don't know if any of you have ever been going to Target or something and seen the train there on Lake Street, but I mean, it goes, and you have to wait for it to go across Lake Street and go all the way down to 38th Street just once a day. It comes along the Greenway, and then it kind of heads south behind Target and goes down to 38 to the ADM, Archer Daniel Midlands grain mill. They have 1 or 2 other smaller clients, but that's their main client. And so, since there's only one train, there's only rail on half the bridge. Actually, they took out one of the rails on the bridge, so half the bridge has nothing on it. And so we say, hey, how about putting a bike ped trail there? And so we did. This was looked at about 15 years ago by the county, and they looked at the bridge and they said, oh, this bridge is fracture critical. It's if one part fails, the whole thing will fall down. And we all know what happened to 35W bridge that was also fracture critical. And so they, I mean, this was before that, but same problem is it's just not built. If one section fails, the whole thing can fall. And so the county said, well, let's build another bridge like 100 yards upriver, downriver. Well, you really can't do that in a national park. And so the Friends of the Mississippi River freaked out, justifiably so, and said, we're not going to support that. We don't, and the Park Service doesn't like that. So we did a study about 3 years ago that said, no, let's just use this bridge. Let's rehab this bridge. And so we came up with different proposals ranging from 12 million to 25 million, and to rehab this bridge and put a bike ped trail on it. And it got an awful lot of coverage and a lot of people excited, because it answered a different question. The county didn't look at rehabbing the bridge. They talked about building a new bridge upriver, downriver, but because their engineers and their risk managers said, we can't use that bridge, it's fracture critical. And I said, well, why didn't they ask about rehabbing it? So we did a study that said you could rehab it for $12 million. And then we got some people saying, well, that's a lot of money, Soren, $12 million, which honestly, for a project like this, it's not that much money. But we did a program, another research study about 2 years ago now, that said that if you rehab this bridge, it would generate over $2 billion worth of economic investment because of all the new development would happen on the other side of the river, just like the Greenway has. The Greenway costs about $35 million to build, But now it generates that every single year in property taxes and tax revenue, and the economic development has been calculated over $2 billion. If you want to make a smart public investment that returns funds to the Greenway, to the community, a great investment for taxpayers is bike infrastructure, like the Midtown Greenway. You build these protected bikeways and people flock to them. The Greenway, as many of you know, is not only nationally famous, it's world famous. It's in the Hall of Fame for Rails to Trails. It's considered the best urban bike trail in the nation, if not the world. I'm constantly giving tours from people coming from other cities saying, how do we get a Greenway? How did you do it? How can we, and so it's very common for me to give bike tours every year, not just from people around the country, but sometimes from other countries. They want a Greenway. And part of the reason is because there's never been a time on the Greenway where there hasn't been new projects and new buildings. People want to live on the Greenway. There's condos, there's apartments. We've got a new 100% affordable apartments coming to the Greenway at 10th Avenue, 11th Avenue. And so it is a way to generate all kinds of economic development. And, it's a win-win-win, as you all know. It's great for commuting. It's great for your health. It's great for the environment. It's a win-win-win. And so, so if we could extend it on this bridge, it would make the best intercity bike highway in the nation, if not the world. And instantly it would have thousands of people commuting on it. As many of you know, the first phase of it is done. So here's the good news. We thought the last phase of the extension over the river and through St. Paul would be to do Ayd Mill Road, but that actually got done first. The city of St. Paul, I had an idea to put a protected bikeway on Ayd Mill, which was going to be the end of our extension. It actually barely made it through. We had to do a ton of advocacy. The city council in St. Paul, it's not overly supportive of bike trails, not like they are in Minneapolis. It passed by like 1 or 2 votes. It was surprisingly close to build that protected bike lane, but phew. We advocated for it, and our friends at Sierra Club and St. Paul Bicycle Coalition and others did a lot of work. Many of you probably attended hearings or sent in emails or letters. Thank you. But that's built. And so what that does is it creates this pressure to keep building it towards the river and towards this bridge. And so it's going to keep getting built. That trail, the St. Paul is going to keep building towards this bridge, which is awesome. And it's going to create this pressure. So what's the holdup? Well, CP Rail is not super enthusiastic about letting us share their bridge. And they want to know what's in it for them. And Ramsey County is supportive, but the real key here is Hennepin County. This bridge is, believe it or not, completely in Hennepin County. The other side of the bridge is not St. Paul. It's still Minneapolis. Not by much, by a couple hundred yards, but it is. And so this is a project for Hennepin County. And so we're strategizing right now with how in the world can we get Hennepin County to get off their behinds and take a leadership role in this. We also currently have something in the works that we hope, fingers crossed, is going to maybe advance this project even more. CP Rail is proposing to merge with Kansas City Southern and take jobs, over 200 jobs out of downtown Minneapolis and close their headquarters and move $15 million worth of salaries out of Minnesota and down to Kansas City. And they need Minnesota's support for this. And so our question is, well, what's in it for Minnesota? You're harming us by this merger. You want our support? You know what you need to do? Anyone got a guess? Let us use a bridge. Let us use a bridge, CP. So we are working with Representatives Omar and McCollum to try to see if we can leverage this merger into an agreement that CP Rail would allow us to share the bridge. Now they can still run their train if they want, but we want to build a bike ped trail on the other half. There are lots of shared bridges around the country that have trains and bicyclists on them. And so we just want CP to say, okay, if Minnesota will support our merger, we'll share the bridge. And by the way, other rail spurs too. There's the Highland, over by Highland Village, or what do they call the new Heights, over in by the Ford plant. There's a spur over there. Highland Bridges, is that it? Yeah.
Highland Bridge.
Okay, and there's a rail spur over there that would make a nice little bike trail. And there's some other spurs that could be part of this too. A spur going north over the river up to connect to the U. So there's a couple other underutilized spurs. So we're hoping that this is our latest effort right now is, and we're getting a lot of help from our other partners, the Sierra Club, a North Star chapter, and others helping with this. But we hope that maybe this merger is an opportunity, and nothing's guaranteed. After that, I really think we need to do more work with Hennepin County and say, we need you to lead on this and to get excited about it, because we need a government agency to partner. Other people say, well, inevitably the ADM mill is going to shut down, and they're going to realize it's not a great place to have it because that corridor is changing. There's new condos and apartments coming in, right? There's the new, is it a Cub store that's down there? So eventually the writing's on the wall, but we want to push it. We want to push it and see if we can, make it happen now. Excuse me. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions.
I have a question while we're on this subject. You talked about different spurs on the east, from the East River Road side of the bridge. Would there be a main trail that would go all the way to Ayd Mill?
Yeah, so the idea is to get an easement and at least along the trail, and at least get half of the way there, next to the current line, and get to Cleveland Avenue. And then after Cleveland Avenue, we're going to have to figure out how to get over to the Ayd Mill section. But we can figure that out. If we can get to Cleveland, at least, it's going to be a huge accomplishment. So that's the current thinking is, let's get an easement along the trail. So not only do we want CP to let us share the bridge, but we'd be asking for an easement to build a trail. So rail with trails, just like the Greenway is on the Seward side, Seward Longfellow side. There's a train there. The same exact thing.
So we just follow the train tracks then?
We follow it at least to Cleveland, and then after that, that rail line gets a little busy. It'd be a little trickier, but we're gonna keep working on it. So so let's see, what else haven't we talked about? We talked about.
I posted a question quite a while ago, and it was about when you were talking about park benches along the road.
Oh yeah.
And we have a park bench we donated in memory of Herb Schultz, who was the ride leader with us at Road. He led like 50 rides a year, just incredible ride leader. Anyway, I really would like it if we could get it outside the chain link fence where it's been for several years, so it's accessible again. It's kind of down there by the Sable Bridge.
It's over by the bridge, over by the power plant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that power plant was quite a thing. So, well, let me answer your question first, and then I'll tell a little story about why that power substation is there. That is MnDOT land, I believe. But I think that's a great question, Mary, and I would be happy to work on that. Because the question is, they did that because there was a homeless encampment there a few years back. And what's the plan? I mean, are they just going to keep it fenced in there forever?
It was inaccessible even before the homeless camp.
But didn't they put the fence up after the homeless camp?
I don't think so.
In any case, that's not supposed to be fenced off. And so, what is the long-term plan? So let me do this. Let me check in with Hennepin County, because that's always where I start. And then I'll say, who's the contact at MnDOT? because I believe that's MnDOT land, even though the county owns most of the Greenway, there's some parts that aren't owned by the county. I think that's MnDOT land, but like, what's the plan? I mean, that used to be a reasonably nice green space, and then you had the little bench there, you know.
And we can certainly move the bench somewhere else. But, you know,
I mean, that's,
spot.
yeah, but I mean, how long are they to keep the ugly fence there? You know, it's a terrible solution to the problem, and you know, I don't think that that's the solution to stopping homeless encampments there. You know, so. But I'd be happy to look into that. And then, yeah, I mean, if you have to move it, But the challenge with that is we'd have to come up with at least some funding for the base, because they'd have to pour a new base somewhere for you. But we can figure it out. But the power station, real quickly, about right before I started 11 years ago, Xcel had this terrible idea to put up giant overhead power lines all up and down the Greenway. And the Midtown Greenway Coalition is like, no, don't put giant, you know, those huge ones, the big giant metal ones. And we had to fight. We had to fight Xcel Energy, and we had to hire an attorney and do extra fundraising and go in front of the Public Utilities Commission. I actually went to one. I had been hired and got to go to some of the final hearings. And we won, believe it or not. We forced Xcel Energy to bury the power lines underneath 28th Avenue instead of stringing them up along the Greenway. You know, the power company should always bury lines, but it costs more, so that's why they don't do it. But that's where they are. And then the lines, and then that substation, that power substation, they said we have to put it right there for this project. And we said, but it's so ugly. I mean, come on, can you bury it? Can you hide it? Can you do anything? And so we convinced them to put that decorative yellow whatever mesh thing around it, so at least be artistic. And then we really pushed them to wrap the whole darn thing, and we couldn't convince them to spend the extra money to wrap the back. Our argument was it's pretty ugly riding on the Greenway, looking in the back of the substation, but they were more concerned with how it would look from people on Hiawatha or people riding the train, you know. And it's better than an ugly power station. I'll grant you that. I wish it weren't there at all, but it's also a symbol of our victory with forcing Xcel Energy to bury their power lines instead of stringing up those ugly things. By the way, the reason the Sabo Bridge is cantilevered like it is, and it's very beautiful, but that's the only way they could figure out how to build it, because there's an ugly giant power line on the other side over there. And so they had to tilt it away from the power line, is what I was told. Otherwise, they would have built it differently. So, I mean, I guess in that case, that ugly giant power structure, overhead power line, helped out for the Sabo Bridge. But anyway, I always thought that was kind of interesting. But, you know, who wants to live under a giant, you know, power structure like that? So some people do though. It's harming development. Development's still happening on Hiawatha, but I don't know. I might think twice about living under a giant electrical line like that. What else have we talked about? We talked about the streetcar.
I had a quick
One
question.
thing that we do a lot that we didn't talk about is we do meet with developers a lot. And anytime something's built along the Greenway, we meet with a developer and we say a couple of things. Don't shadow the Greenway. We had to actually fight really hard a development on Lyndale and the Greenway. A developer proposed this really high building that was going to cast shadows on the trail. And non-cyclists don't understand it. Why do you care if there's shadows on the bike trail? And we said, because we bike all year round and we don't want shadows on the trail, because then the ice doesn't melt. All of you know, in the Greenway, there are shadows from some existing buildings like the Sears building and others. In those sections of the Greenway, the ice doesn't melt in the winter. But other parts of the Greenway in the winter, if the sun hits the trail, it'll be completely smooth in a couple of days, right? Even if it's really cold outside. And so for year-round commuters, it's very dangerous to have these shadows. And so when a new developer comes in. Next time you go bike down the Greenway, notice this. Most of the buildings step back away from the Greenway on the south side. That's to let the sun come in and hit the trail. We don't care on the north side because that doesn't create shadows. But most of the buildings you'll see, we had to fight this developer who wanted to build this project. I forget what it's called now. It's right next to the American Legion, and it has a little restaurant in it, or sometimes. But anyway, it's orange, but it's right at Lyndale and the Greenway, and he's like, oh, we can't build our building unless we go straight up. And I'm like, well, you're going to harm the Greenway, and you're going to make it hard for people. And he's like, well, we promised to shovel it. You're not going to shovel it. I know you're not. And so they went all around, and then they said, we can't build our building. We'll lose our financing. And I said, no, you won't. And finally, he was forced to step it back. And what do you know? He didn't lose his financing, and he built his building. And then every other developer ever since has come to us and said, look, we're stepping away from the Greenway. Like, good. And the other thing we say is you have to build a walkway along the Greenway, a promenade, we call it, and it has to be public. And so you might notice that most of the, if not all, of the condos have walkways in front of them, and they're public. Some of them don't look public, and so that was a bit of a unfortunate thing. They kind of tried to weasel around it a little bit, but most of them you can walk almost from Hennepin to Lyndale on public walkways. And the idea is more eyes on the Greenway, more activity, and just create a way for people to get to the Greenway and just kind of keep eyes on the Greenway. And then Elon Uptown Apartments near Emerson created this cool bridge to keep that promenade going. If you've ever seen that one near Emerson Avenue, they have this cool bridge, pedestrian bridge for their walkway, which is really nice. And so it's all just a way to keep the Greenway vibrant. And so we didn't touch on this. One of the things I hear most often is, oh, the Greenway's dangerous. In fact, every time I post something that gets wide distribution on Facebook or something, you get someone, probably doesn't live in Minneapolis or St. Paul, saying, oh, I would never go to the Greenway. It's so dangerous. I'm like, well, do you know something I don't? Because there are some years where there are 0 reports of any kind of serious crime in the Greenway. In fact, knock on wood, it's been a very quiet year in the Greenway this year. And there are, on average, I would say we hear of 1 mugging in the Greenway per year, and some years 0. And so, the Greenway is as safe as any bike trail in the metro. It has very low crime rates. Now, does that mean you should bike on it in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. by yourself? I don't know. You're probably better off still biking on the Greenway at 1 a.m. than you are in Lake Street. You got to make your choices, I guess, because on Lake Street, you could get hit by a car. In the Greenway, you're probably going to be okay. But still, I recommend you bike with a buddy. I recommend if you see something that seems strange, a lot of times it's a gathering of youth under a bridge or something. But again, it's extremely rare. We do hear, I haven't heard it for a while, it's occasionally youth throw things at people off the bridges. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't heard of that for a while. So, I mean, it's an urban trail. It does have some urban things, but the crime just, it really isn't there, especially, honestly, Lake Street and parts of the neighborhood are struggling with crime increases, but we're not, so far, we're not seeing the Greenway. We did have a big homeless encampment in the Greenway a couple years ago in the first part of the pandemic. That was a real struggle. But even then, the homeless weren't really harming anyone that was biking in the Greenway. That's not what they were doing. Were they getting harmed themselves? Yes, but they weren't harming others. But still, the policy is there's no overnight camping in the Greenway, and so that is generally enforced. And so we haven't seen, knock on wood, much homelessness encampments in the Greenway, and I'm I serve on a lot of different organizations in Midtown trying to work on how to make sure the area is safe and that unhoused folks get the services they need. A lot of times we're just really pushing the county to do more, and the city just has got to do more and do better on dealing with this issue and this crisis. And so it's a tough one. But right now, but I guess that's my message to all of you. Be safe, be smart on any trail, bike with a buddy at night, and make sure you're aware of your surroundings, and for gosh sakes, turn around if you feel anything is uncomfortable for you. And things can happen, but it's not this crime infested place that it was before the Midtown Greenway Trail got put in. That's for darn sure. And currently it's really in pretty good shape. And you know what's going to make it even better? When Freewheel opens. It's opening, everybody, in the spring. It was Freewheel Midtown Bike Center was supposed to open this summer, but they had the supply chain problems, and they could have opened like 2 or 3 weeks ago, in late September. And the owner said, you know what? It's not a good time to open a bike shop in the fall, because it's just, that's when it's really slow and people don't buy bikes. So they pushed it to the spring. And we're going to have a new office down on the Greenway again, next to Freewheel. So we can't move into our office. It's mostly me and the bike walk coordinator. Sometimes we have interns and others, but in any case, we're going to wait till the spring to move to. So I have a little temporary office in Alina headquarters across from the Midtown Global Market. But Freewheel is going to reopen, and it's going to be awesome. There's going to be a cafe. There's going to be, I don't think it'll be, I don't think they're going to have sandwiches. You remember when they used to have sandwiches? That was great. And soup, but they're going to have, stuff to eat, snacks and coffee and all that good stuff. And of course a bike shop and bike repair, and you can fill your flat tires, and there's a restroom. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I feel like once Freewheel opens in the spring, I think we're going to finally start to feel like we're getting back. And they just painted their outside today too. I don't know what they're doing, but it looks nice and vibrant. So it's going to be great. I don't have the exact date, but sometime in the spring. And then our office will be down there too. So it'll be good to be back down on the Greenway again. That is what I had, I think. Upcoming events. I did mention we're doing a cleanup on Saturday. If anyone's interested, it's part of Philip's clean sweep. And that's just a little Greenway cleanup at 10:30. You certainly can email me, soren@midtowngreenway.org. I think I put it up on our Facebook page. If you haven't found us, it might just be listed on the page. I don't know if I made it a separate event. Bare Bones Puppet Theater is putting on a huge Halloween extravaganza at the end of the month. I think it's the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st. It's this huge giant puppet show with fire and stilters, and it's a big deal. And it's going to be on the Greenway for the first time ever. It's going to be at that park I was telling you about between 10th and 11th that we call CPRO, or Midtown Park, between 10th and 11th Avenue. So if you know where the Midtown Global Market is, it's over around in that area on the Greenway. And it's from 7 to 8 p.m. I just put a story up on our Facebook or our website today, midtowngreenway.org. But I can't wait. You're going to sit on the hillside of CPRO Park, and then the puppets are going to be on the other side of the Greenway where this future streetcar would go. Remember, I was telling you that side's always empty, and there's going to be puppets dancing around, and then people are going to be biking in between. And I'm told that if you happen to be biking on the Greenway between 7 and 8 p.m. on those nights, you'll be asked if you would actually like to be in the puppet show. I think they want you to wear something like a puppet head or something as you bike past. I don't know, or a hat or something, or lights. I don't know what it is, but could be pretty funny. So if you happen to be biking on the Greenway those nights, stop by or be in the show. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's cool. Maybe Mike and Karen.
All right, that's what I had. Questions, discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I see one other question on the chat here, or at least one. Amy had a lot of good questions, but I don't know if you addressed, there's a Summit Avenue Trail,
Uh-oh.
and she's
that just me?
wondering if that will make it in the link to
Sasha?
St. Paul. Oh, Soren's muted. Something happened.
Hello?
Oh, yeah. Are you back, Soren?
Sasha? Ah,
Well, I was just gonna say that little park there between 10th and 11th, whatever you said, SEPA, that'd be
Yeah.
a good place for Herb's bench too.
Oh, yeah.
I think there might be a concrete bench there, but you know, there'd already be plenty of concrete poured.
rat.
Yeah, didn't TCBC fund that bench, as I
Yeah,
recall?
it was purchased with all our memorial gifts
Hello?
for
No,
her.
we hear you now.
Can you hear us? No, he's in and out.
I can't see him anymore. Can you guys?
No.
Okay.
Oh, he's frozen.
Hello?
Yeah. We'll see if he'll come back in.
Maybe he'll come back.
Yeah. Does anybody, I was going to ask him on that 311, can you do that at any place you see graffiti, or is that just on the Greenway?
That was the sense I got,
Three-
that it's a city of Minneapolis
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that sounds,
311's universal throughout Minneapolis.
yeah,
And then the operator routes your call to, the appropriate city office.
I see.
Oh, okay. So it's not just,
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's back.
you froze up too. We were talking about the 311, that's citywide, right? I mean, you can do that with graffiti on the Cedar
Yeah,
Lake
that's
Trail or any-
citywide. And I forget the name of the app, but there's like an app that you can download. And it's pretty sweet. You just you take a picture of the graffiti, and you can even send it in anonymously. So it's pretty sweet. Oh man.
Yeah, your internet seems to be, looks like it's
Sorry.
slowing down there. The other thing, Soren, if you can answer this without getting into engineering question, on the bridge going across the Mississippi, what would have to be done to the bridge to upgrade it?
Well, we would have to basically you have to shore it up. So I'm not an engineer, but it's fracture critical, like I was saying. And so it needs to be made redundant so that if one section falls, the whole bridge doesn't fall. And so we have a study that shows how it could be made redundant and made strong enough for the public. And so we hired drones. We put drones all over it. We hired an engineering firm that did a pretty complete study and showed that it could be rehabbed. It could be made strong enough for pedestrians and cyclists. And so, like I said, I feel like Hennepin County wasn't asking the right questions last time when they looked at it 10 or 15 years ago. Because the right question is, how do you rehab this bridge? It's a historic bridge. If you use the bridge as it is, then the Friends of the Mississippi River are like, this is great. And the National Park Service says, this is terrific. But if you try to build a new bridge, a modern bridge, that'll face a lot of opposition because it's a national park unit. So we say rehab the bridge, or worst case scenario, I guess, would be a replica bridge using those existing piers. And you just make a bridge that looks exactly the same. We had an additional idea to put another deck on top of it and let the trains run underneath and put the bike peds on top with a wider trail, which is really a cool idea. but unfortunately, it would probably run into opposition from the Friends of the Mississippi River and perhaps the Park Service. We just have to maintain the status quo and keep the bridge exactly the way it is. I mean, it'll change a little, obviously, but because we're going to have to put up some, some protective guardrails or whatever is necessary to make it safe. But we can't make major structural changes without the Friends of the Mississippi River complaining, and justifiably so. I used to work, as we mentioned in the beginning, with the National Parks Conservation Association, so I understand the goal to protect the parks, and so that's part of their mission.
Soren, just one other quick question. I know we're going to be reaching the end here. Is your board, how big is your board? And
We have about 10 people on our board right now.
okay.
We used to be organized by neighborhoods. I think, as I mentioned, our founder George went around to the different neighborhoods and got them all to form our coalition. But now we've decided, really, we don't, even though we still work a lot with the neighborhoods, we're better off to kind of recruit our own board members. And so we have about 10 board members, and they don't have to live in along the Greenway anymore. They can pretty much be from anywhere. Like a lot of organizations, though, we're really looking to try to be more diverse and try to make sure we have the right gender. I don't think it's any surprise to cyclists that we tend to be there's an awful lot of white male cyclists out there. And so we are looking for more women to join our board. We're looking for more cyclists of color. And you don't have to be a cyclist either. I mean, the thing about the Greenway is obviously it's about biking, but it's about walking. It's about economic development. To be honest, I mean, most of the people on our board are cyclists, but some aren't. And some are more serious than others about it. Probably, they bike, but people just appreciate the Greenway and what it's brought to the neighborhoods and to Minneapolis and to the community. And that's why they want to serve and be on it.
Right. Thank you. Tim, was
there was just this one question that we ran into technical difficulties. There was a question that Amy had. Is there going to be a link between the Summit Avenue trail that's been proposed to St. Paul and to the bridge?
I don't know specifically from Summit, but I would say that, as I mentioned earlier, we want to try to get an easement to Cleveland Avenue, and then we need to figure out how to connect Cleveland down to Ayd Mill. But the fact that Ayd Mill, what we were going to call the final section of the Greenway extension, has already been built, as I noted, that's going to cause a lot of pressure. And the mayor of St. Paul said it. Now it's time to connect to the Midtown Greenway. So Ramsey County and City of St. Paul, they're going to do their part to start connecting to that bridge. And I have no doubt that we're going to see more trails, that connection made. But we got to figure out how to get CP Rail to the table and to convince them to share their bridge with us for as long as the other railroad, which is called Minnesota Commercial, as long as they're still renting the use of the rail line for their one remaining client, that Archer Daniel Midlands Mill. How can we get CP Rail to the table to talk with us? So that continues to be our goal, and we're going to keep working on it. And it's a long-term project, but we're going to keep at it. And every time we see any kind of opportunity like this merger with Kansas City Southern, this could be an opportunity to get them to the table. Because sharing the bridge is small potatoes to them. This is a multi-billion-dollar merger that would create one of the largest, if not the largest, railroad companies in the nation. So, I'm hopeful that they'll be like, sure, if this helps us get our merger approved by the feds, then So I'm hopeful that maybe this will do it. But we still need Hennepin County to step up and help us.
I was just, if I can amplify my question, Soren, I was just wondering if there are some synergies because we're getting such pushback from the homeowners on Summit, as I'm sure any of you know who've biked down Summit and seen the big SOS signs.
Yeah.
You know, it's a jog down Cleveland. I get that, but you know, if
Yeah.
it has to be, could that be the route, or could there be kind of joint advocacy?
As far as joint advocacy, please, I'm happy to help with that. I mean, our mission is to help other bike facilities too. We're always happy to you know, we're doing what we can for the idea for I-94 and changing that into more of a boulevard. You know, we're part of that Rethinking I-94 group and doing what we can. We advocated a lot for Hennepin Avenue, protected bike lane that's going to go in there, and the bus lanes. And so, because Hennepin Avenue is going to connect to the Greenway. So we're happy to do more work. And, you know, we partner with the St. Paul Bicycle Coalition a lot on this project. And honestly, if you know Andy Singer is kind of the reason we relaunched this effort, because of some of his articles that he wrote and in Streetsman and other places. And I was reading his stuff and I'm like, he's right. Someone's got to step in and redo this. I mean, it's always been our project, but we were just kind of waiting for something to happen. And instead, we decided to be proactive, I think in 2019 or 2018, and really start pushing for this project. So we're going to keep pushing. But if we can help with Summit, I mean, we definitely support protected bike lanes. I mean, the reason the Greenway is so popular is because it's the ultimate protected bike lane. It's the reason it's the busiest bikeway in the region. It's got 5,000 people on it. And this is, you know, pre-pandemic, but you know, an average of 5,000 people a day, over 1 million trips are taken on it every year. And the reason it is because it's separated from traffic. And you know, you all are experienced cyclists, and you know, heck, you know, Rob's got a picture of himself riding on a road with no shoulder. So, I mean, you know, in his photo there. So we can handle painted lines and things like that, or no bike lanes at all. But if you really want people to get out biking, especially families, I would never bike with my kids, my 3 little kids, on just a painted bike lane. They're too wobbly. They're all over the place. But I'll take them on a protected bike trail as long as they can stay to the right, because, you know, people are passing on the left. But I mean, the thing is about Summit Avenue is it needs a protected bike lane. And that's why Ayd Mill is so great. It's protected, it's separated from traffic. And that's what we need more of. You know, there's a video, did anyone see this? Just got posted to YouTube yesterday, the day before, of a car driving down the bike lane, 2 cars actually driving in the bike lane on 28th Avenue, right by the Greenway, but up on 28th Avenue. They're just cruising down the bike lane there, you know, and you know, it's because the city's doing the right thing by putting in a lot of great bike lanes, but they're also not figuring out a few important things, which is how do you keep the cars out of the driving in the bike lanes. But that's a bollard, and bollards are fine, but what you really need is separated. So Summit will be much better off, instead of that darn little one white lane of paint, one little white stripe of paint. You know, and one thing I think that's always disheartening is, like, with the whole Hennepin Avenue advocacy effort, is, you know, how certain some business owners are that they're going to suffer if they put bike lanes and transit in front of their business. But there's so many studies that say otherwise, that cyclists bring money, cyclists generate money. You want to make more money for your business, put a protected bike lane in front of it and a good walkway, and people will walk and bike to your location. And I don't know about any of you, but I actually lived in a city, Washington, D.C., where it's laughable to think you could drive your car to a small business and park in front of it. Nobody does that in Washington, D.C. You park your car and walk or bike or take transit, you know. And so and those businesses do just fine. And I feel like there's plenty of parking. Maybe you can't park right in front of your business, but the trade-off is you get tons of business from cyclists and transit riders, you know. And it was disheartening to hear how many people were sure that these protected bike lanes were going to bring harm. And it's the same thing to Summit Avenue. These, I don't need to convince you, but it will help Summit Avenue, and it'll make people safer. And so, you know, we're happy to help where we can.
Tim, was there any other questions? You're on mute.
I saw Russ, I see the comment about Russ. You know, Russ Stark's very supportive of cycling and transit, and Russ is always a great advocate. So definitely work with him. And I feel like he's a real key to improving cycling in St. Paul. St. Paul's got a ways to go to catch up to Minneapolis, but hopefully slowly getting there.
Okay, there was just one other question we missed from Lisa Dust. Are you available, Lisa, to ask it yourself? It's about construction by the Beltline Boulevard, and it's a very dangerous area
Yeah,
with railroad tracks.
yeah, because I know they've been doing construction and they just opened the trail part there, but they're also doing construction on the road. And when you're going, sorry, I'm terrible at directions. I think you're going northbound and you're trying to turn westbound onto the trail. It's like really, really dangerous with the railroad tracks, and there's no place to really cross in a
Is
safe
the-
manner there. And I'm kind of curious if they're planning anything for that, or
I'm not 100% sure where you're talking about. It doesn't sound like the Greenway.
it's like in St. Louis Park.
Oh,
So-
SLP.
Yeah,
You know, the Greenway is only in Minneapolis, but it is a mess over there.
it is.
That's for darn sure. And the Kenilworth Trail, you know, obviously is a beautiful trail, and we would have, like many people, greatly preferred the train not go down the Kenilworth Trail. We did not want it to come down the Greenway, make no mistake,
Right.
because of full scale, double track, double ballasted light rail line is very destructive to trails, as you're seeing from the Kenilworth. It should have gone up
Very much
100.
so.
I don't understand it. A lot of people don't. But all I can tell you is I'm not really privy to all that over there, but it's a complete and total mess.
Yeah,
I
that's
do-
what I thought I'd ask if you knew
No,
anything.
I don't. And I don't recommend anyone bike out west, you know, via the Greenway. There's anyone who's tried, there's tons of detours. It's just a disaster. So all I can say is it stinks, and we just have to hang in there and hope. I mean, I hope that that's coming along, but they don't give me updates.
Well, they opened
about
up the trail that they repaved, which is nice. But then when you're getting off of Beltline, like if you're going, I think it's northbound and trying to turn onto that trail, you almost have to go over the railroad tracks or go in the bike lane in the wrong direction to
Yeah,
avoid
Yeah,
crossing the railroad tracks horizontally to get
Yeah.
onto the trail.
it's a mess. It's a little
really is.
outside. It's outside of our area because I don't really know who to contact out there
Okay, I
about
just
that.
thought I'd ask. I didn't know if it had been
Yeah.
spoken about earlier,
No,
since I couldn't get on there.
it's a mess. I
It is.
tried biking out there and just got frustrated with all the stupid detours and everything. So I don't know what to say
Okay.
about that, except please get done fast, make it done so we can bike again out there.
Yeah, well, thanks.
Sure.
So Tim, you're on mute.
Well, while Tim's unmuting, while
Tim-
you were unavailable,
Tim,
Soren?
you're muted.
Yes. Oh, I thought I
There
unmuted.
Can
No, I
you
hear
hear
you.
me
I'm
now?
unmuted. Anyway, while you were gone, I just suggested that maybe that little park where the puppet show is gonna be would
Oh, yeah.
actually be a really good place for the Herb Schultz bench.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
And it's already has poured concrete.
My only hesitation is it's park board, and the park board, you know, sometimes has a lot of rules. I can tell you that any other place in the Greenway might be easier, but I'm willing to help try for that. But I also, like I said before, I also believe that ugly fence, don't they have just a bunch of junk in there too? I mean, where the memorial bench is, that needs to, I want to know what the plan is over there, because we've actually done lots of plantings over there and planted trees as part of our tree planting, and it's supposed to be a nice green space, or at least nice as can be. And I hope the plan isn't to keep the fence up there forever, and I can say, hey, we have a bench in there that no one can use. I'm happy to do that work. And if that doesn't work, we can look for somewhere else in the Greenway, or we could look at CPRO Park and see what they have in mind. part of my job is dealing with government bureaucracy. I hope none of you work for the government, but if you do, thank you for your service. But the park board's harder to work with than Hennepin County is in the Greenway. That's one thing I've learned. I've been trying to tell them that they're hard to work with, but people who are hard to work with never think they're hard to work with. So it's kind of a challenge.
Okay, this has been a very productive hour and a half. Maybe you could come back in a year or two. I'm sure we'll have another at least
Sure,
hour and a
yeah.
half's worth of material to go through. So thank you so much, Soren.
Well, thank you.
It's been a real treat to have you with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, TCBC. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to the internet there, but I'm glad I got back here and was on for most of it. But I'll keep ruining biking. That's right, John. And go Hawks. Thanks, everybody.
So I just have a few closing remarks, and Soren and Tim, if you could stay on after I stop the recording, that'd be great. So thanks everyone for attending. I think I counted about 16 participants for this session of TCBC Bike University. I'll try to get the recording up as soon as possible, and the link will be in the notes on the Bike U webpage. The TCBC Bike U Council of Regents is working on other sessions. Ones that we discussed at our last meeting, since we're coming into winter, is fat bicycling and winter bicycling. Or if you have any other ideas for programs, please write to me or anybody on the council and discuss, and we can discuss those at our next meeting. So thank you all for attending. And I will stop the recording now.
Thank you, Soren, Edward, and Tim.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.